All right, we're COMP397, and this is week 3, lesson 3, part 2. And this is last video we made just now. Was all about assignment number 1. This one is all about Impress.js because I've got asked, hey, I don't know anything about Impress.js. Tom, how do I do my assignment? We're going to talk about it right now. I'm going to talk about Impress.js as, first of all, what is Impress.js before we get into the nitty-gritty of it. So if I go to Impress.js, right? And if I look it up, let's take a look at Impress.js. All right, so here's my Impress.js, right? Are you bored with all those slide-based presentations? Spacebar to arrow to keys to navigate. Yes, I am. Don't you think that presentations given in modern browsers shouldn't copy the limits of classic slide decks? Absolutely. Would you like to impress your audience with stunning visualization of your talk? Sure you would. Look what it can do, right? Impress.js doesn't just do what I did with the dragon. Impress.js can do a lot of different things, right? It can do, it almost acts like Prezi. If you guys have ever done Prezi, you've ever seen Prezi? It's very similar to Prezi, but you're programming it on your own, right? You can visualize your big thoughts, right, and your tiny ideas, and take a look. You can position and rotate your text. This is really cool. The only limit is your imagination, right? And this is really important. Use the source loop. Why does it say use the source loop? Because if you actually go here and click on use the source loop, it gives you the source document, which we're going to get into in a second, and all the documentation, which is why this is a really great documentation one. The documentation is where the API stuff, it describes the API as well. So your JavaScript file has all the API documentation built in, how to use stuff and examples of how to do stuff. But one more thing, and if you notice, there's 3D. Take a look, right? 3D, almost like 3D text. You can do this kind of stuff to make it more interesting. So that's really a Prezi-like presentation. This Impress.js stuff in a nutshell. So if I go to use the source, Luke, right here, and by the way, use the source, Luke, is a Star Wars reference, right? For those people who don't know, right? I know Star Wars. If I click on this thing, it's going to take me to GitHub. And by the way, hey, see, they're even using GitHub. Why? GitHub is the de facto standard for version control, right? And that's why I'm getting guys to do GitHub. If you haven't signed up for GitHub already, one of the first little bonus things I asked you to do is sign up for GitHub, get a GitHub account. And this is why, because as software developers, I want you to market yourselves a little bit, right? Outside of the realms of just doing assignments for me, right? The best way to market yourself is to create a portfolio, right? How do you create a portfolio? You put your code here on GitHub, which anyone can see. Some of you might have concerns. You might say, oh, Tom, I don't want anyone to steal my code. And again, I told you this before the last time, which is, ladies and gentlemen, that your code isn't going to be life-shattering at this point in time. It might be, right? And if you're really concerned, right, you can always get yourself a private repo that you can share with me instead of a public repo. The default when you sign up for GitHub, if you don't pay anything, is public repo. It's a public account that you create. If you want to make private repos, you can actually sign up as a student on the bottom if you go to GitHub, and it'll show you how. But this is the site here, Impress. So what could you do here if you really wanted to use this entire framework? You could fork this person again, right? Forking it will bring the entire framework to your own GitHub if you want to. All right, so let's take a look. Impress.js, presentation framework. How to use it? Use the source loop. If I click on use the source loop, what does it take me to? It actually takes me to the Impress.js JavaScript file, right? Underneath it, it has an index.html file. And if in there, with some ASCII art there, it tells you how to use everything and explains step by step how to use this framework, okay? Now, I'm not going to just leave you with this. But definitely, I want you to refer to this if you want to do anything special with Impress.js. If you want to move stuff around, understand how everything moves, this is the place to fall back to. This is your documentation area here. So, and again, he talks about this. Here is where interesting things start to happen. Each step of the presentation should be an element inside the Impress ID with a class name of step. We'll talk about this, and I'm going to show you an example of it in a second. And if you notice here, it's hard for you to read this, but if you notice that it says your data-x is equal to -1,000, right? That means you're gonna move diagonally because -1,000 and -1,500 is going to move in a diagonal fashion to the left, right? So actually, it's off screen, right? That's what you're doing. Okay, so take a look at this stuff. this is one thing I'd like you to do. It's part of your assignment to understand how to use Impress.js. You're going to absorb a new API that you've never seen before. This is part of it as well. All right, so Impress.js. That's one piece. The other piece is I've got a little PowerPoint presentation I'm going to go over right now. All right, to start off. So what we're talking about here when we talk about the dragon is something old school called interactive fiction, right? If you've never done interactive fiction before, it really starts off, we talk about stuff like, almost like choose your own adventure. That's really what it comes down to. Actually, when I read there's some books out there today you can read for kids that says, which way do you want to go? I read this stuff to my kid. Do you want to go to the forest or do you want to go to the beach? And different things happen depending on where your kid chooses to go, right? Same thing with you. You choose your own adventure, and there's different endings. There's alternate endings to the adventure, right? This is what I want you. This is what you're actually creating with your interactive fiction. You're choosing your own ending. There's different kinds of possibilities here for this story. So it's story-based or narrative-based gameplay, if you will. Okay. So that's the first piece. And this is where we start off. We start off by, first of all, we have to download and install this Impress.js option here, right? If you notice, here's what your document will look like. So let's do that together, right? So I'm just going to kill this. And I'd like you to fire up your Visual Studio, right? We want to try this out. We want to understand this. I'm going to keep this document again. We can go back to refer to it later, right? But I'm going to stop debugging, and I'm going to go into my Visual Studio and create a new project file, right? For those of you who forgot how to do this, we'll do it again, right? So new project. You're going to go into a place called web project. That's what I want you to do, right? You're going to choose ASP.NET web application, right? And down here, before you click OK, you're going to rename your application to whatever you want. For me, for today, because I'm talking about your, it's for you, I'm going to call this thing COMP397 Lesson 3. Part 2, right? Because that's where we started off. So COMP397 Lesson 3 Part 2. I'm going to bring it up so you can see it a little bit. Here it is. If you notice on me, I have two things. I have create directory for solution if checked, and I also have create new Git repository because I've chosen Git as my default version control provider, right? If you don't choose Git, you're going to see add solution to source control or something like that. So you have to check that. I would check that on. Okay. Press OK. And now you're going to go here where it says select a kind of template. Please don't choose anything else other than empty for now. That's the one I want you to choose. If you choose other things, you're going to get other crap in there that you don't need, right? Empty. Okay, if you were going to host this thing on Azure, right? If you had an Azure account, you could click host in the cloud. We're not going to do that. We're going to press OK. Leave this unchecked and press OK. As a default, it creates these project files like we did last week. Okay, so for those of you who missed last week and the week before, and I know some of you are new, right? This is what we come up with. Okay, we need to create our folder structure like we always do. So I'm going to right click here, I'm going to go add, and I'm going to go new folder, and in my new folder I'm going to put in CSS. We need a CSS folder in this case. All right, I'll do it again. Right click on my project. I'm going to go add. And I'm going to go new folder, and we're going to put scripts, because this is where our scripts are going to kind of end up, right? For us, we also want to have assets. Potentially, I want to add some images and stuff like that in my folder, right? So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go add, I'm going to go new folder, and I'm going to go assets. That's the name of my new folder. Under my assets folder, I'm going to make some subfolders right now, okay? Right click, I'm going to go add, new folder, I'm going to say images. Do the same thing, right click, add, new folder, right? Audio. And you can make it also, you can also call it sounds if you want to. Add, new folder, fonts. So if I want to have some custom fonts or whatever, this is the place to do that. Okay, under scripts, I'm going to add a new folder. And in my new folder, it's going to be called lib. Right? This is our library. So this is where we're going to keep all our libraries, right? For now, we only need this Impress.js library, and I got to get that somehow, right? Now, I know that I can get that on GitHub, right? I know I can get that on GitHub. So this is what I just need one file for me to do that, right? So let's go to GitHub, and let's say I suggest I don't know what that is. And if I go to my GitHub pages and I want to search for Impress, again, I can search up here. If I say Impress, right? Impress.js. Let's just try this out, see what happens, right? There's a bunch of different people that have cloned the Impress.js file, right? There's tons and tons of them. So you might have trouble finding which one is the latest one, and I don't recommend you do that. Typically, you can go through here and find your Impress.js. You could, if it was the only one that was named that way. But the best way to do it is actually to look, just Google it, Impress.js. If you just put Impress.js up there, and if you notice, there's a github.io page under Bartaz. So Bartaz, github.io, Impress.js. That's the actual presentation we just got. You can also go to this other link here, Bartaz Impress.js, which is the one we need, right? This is the one. So now there's a couple ways you can do this. You can download the zip file here, right? You can also go into your JavaScript piece right here, and there's only one file you need, Impress.js, right? So that's all we need. So if I was going to download, let me just download the zip file. I'm going to put it on my desktop here. So I'm going to download the zip. Let's do it together, right? I'm going to put it on my desktop. So here's my desktop. Here's my Impress.js master.zip, right? I'm going to save it. I've got it, right? And now I'm going to go to my desktop. Here it is right here, right? And there's a couple ways you can unzip it. If you have 7-zip, which I recommend you grab for Windows because it's free, it's the easiest way to do it, or WinRAR, please, WinRAR is not as popular. You can extract to Impress.js master, or if you're really someone who doesn't want to, you can always go to send to as an example, and you can uncompress it, right? Let's go with this 7-zip. You have to uncompress it somehow. So I'm going to go here to extract to Impress.js. I've got the uncompressed version right here. I'm just going to get rid of this because I don't need it anymore. Here we go, right? And if I double click in here, I have my Impress.js master, and in here, in my JavaScript folder, I have my Impress.js library right here. All I've done is just download it from the Impress.js website. Okay, remember that when I use Visual Studio, in order for me to include this, the easiest way to do it is drag and drop, right? I want to drag and drop. So I'm going to go back into Visual Studio. I'm going to pull up the place where I have it, and I'm going to drag and drop this Impress.js library into my lib folder, which I just created. Okay, this is the first piece. Are you with me? Please be with me, because this is bad if you're not with me here. Okay, cool. The next piece I need to do is add in an index.html page. So I'm going to right-click onto my project. I'm going to say add, and I'm going to go HTML page. I'm going to call this thing index. Now there's different things you can do. You can call it default. You can call it whatever you want. Index is the de facto standard nowadays for non-ASP.NET applications. Okay, and under HTML, remember we want to comply to HTML5 because this is what we're doing here in this course. We're going to say lang is equal to English, right? Which is important. This is the area we're in right now. If you were going to do a language, some other language, you'd choose that for SEO perspective. From that perspective, in the head, I want you to put in a meta tag for character set. Char set is equal to UTF-8. This is the exact same thing we did last week, right? And I also want you to put in a meta tag with name is equal to viewport. Remember, we did this for mobile first environments, right? And content is equal to width is equal to device width, initial scale 1. So this is standard stuff that we would normally get. All right. So again, by the way, when I finish doing this, I'll upload this to GitHub. I'll have another repo for you guys to look at. Worst case, if you can't follow along and you want to follow along with the videos and you want to see my GitHub, what we did today in GitHub, I'll put it up for you in a few minutes. Okay, the title is obviously going to be today's lesson. So it's going to be, COMP397, and it's lesson 3, part 2, because that's really what we're doing, right? Now you can make this whatever you like. You can make all this whatever you like. We're missing a couple things here. This is going to be where I put my CSS section, right? So this is my CSS section. I need a couple of things in here. And remember, I mentioned that I want to reset my standard CSS, right? It's a good practice to reset CSS, okay? Where do I get this bloody reset CSS file anyway? If I go back up here, and if I just type reset CSS in Google, right, it's going to take me to this place, CSS Tools, Reset CSS, Meyer Web, right? This is where it is, this link, the first link that comes up. So if I put, all I've done is put Reset CSS in Google to get this, right? Okay, so here's my Reset CSS, and you could do a couple things. You could kind of drag and drop if you want to, or copy. You can also copy this file. You can grab a copy of the file by right-clicking and save link as, right? Here's my Reset CSS, right? I'm going to put this on my desktop as well, just for kicks. Why not? I'll put it on my desktop, make it easy for you guys to find it. Okay, I've got it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my desktop, right? Here's my desktop, and I want to find my Reset CSS, right? Oh, here it is. Here's my Reset CSS. If I want to get to desktop, right, just click on desktop here in your File Explorer, Windows Explorer, right? And I'm still going to have my Reset CSS file, which is right here, right? It's about 1K. It's really small. And I need to kind of pull up my Visual Studio and have my my file folders up. And again, I'm going to drag and drop into the CSS folder like this. Again, I can't be debugging. If I'm debugging, I cannot drag and drop. Okay? Okay, good. I got my reset.css. I want to include this in the CSS section, so I'm going to drag and drop this back over into my index.html file. So now I've got my reset. Remember that whenever you do anything for the web these days, it's important for you to reset your styles, standard styles that come with every browser, so that you start off at 0. Otherwise, you get some weird effects, especially when we do Impress.js. All right, because Impress.js is a CSS-heavy framework. We need to do stuff with CSS. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to do. Typically, in other courses, you might be told to put your JavaScript in line in here. I don't recommend that. We're not going to do that in this course. And also, to put your JavaScript in the head of your document. I'm just repeating myself here. We put it in the body of your document because then it doesn't stop your page from loading, typically. So I'm going to put it down here. So if I'm going to create, I'm going to drag and drop Impress.js in here, right? I'm going to create a section again with some comments. Here's my comments, right? I'm going to call this the JavaScript section, right, inside my HTML document. And I'm going to drag and drop this Impress.js in here. Okay. Save. Are you with me? Okay, this is a great place to create my GitHub repository for you guys so you guys can follow along just in case you haven't been able to do that. So I'm going to go to GitHub. If I'm going too slow for some people, please bear with me. I'm trying to make sure that everyone's on the same page as we do this, right? I'm going to create a new repository. This is how we do the new repository, just as a recap. I'm going to click this plus when I'm in my GitHub account. Click plus, go new repository. And in here, I'm going to create the new repository. So I'm going to call this, COMP, if I can do this, COMP397, right? And it's lesson 3, part 2, right? Same as what my project is going to be called. And then press create repository. When I do that, I get this URI, right? I need this for to set up my GitHub here in Visual Studio. So again, in Visual Studio, I've already clicked on that GitHub is my main revision control provider. If not, you're going to right-click on solution, and down here somewhere you'll see something like add solution to source control. If you haven't already added it in, you can add it here now. Okay, I don't have that because I've already got solution control going. But now I want to go into my Team Explorer, right? I want to go to changes, and this is, if you notice, these are all my changes I've made to my document. I've added these files, I've rearranged stuff, whatever. So I'm going to call this setup basic framework. For Impress.js. I'm not quite ready yet, but that's part of it. I'm going to commit, and it might ask me to save, and I will, right? I've got my commit, and I'm going to go to home again. I'm going to go to unsync commits, and if you notice, there's this yellow space in here, right, where I have to put in my URI. Well, I'll go back to GitHub, grab my URI, copy it, go back to Visual Studio, paste it, and now I have my link. If I press publish, it should connect Visual Studio to GitHub, and everything's published. If I go back on GitHub, I'm going to refresh, and then you'll see that everything that I'm doing here is live and active. Worst case, at the end of today, you could always fork me on GitHub and get everything that I'm doing here inside of your own repo, your GitHub files. Okay, cool. I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer now. I've already kind of done our first commit. Notice my workflow. I've just created kind of a few things. Now I've committed to GitHub. I'm going to do a bunch of commits to GitHub over the course of today, right? Okay, we're not quite finished setting up Impress.js. I need to do a couple other things. And if you notice, this line here, Impress, I got to call the Impress framework, and I'm going to call the init method of the Impress framework, if you will, to kick this off. Now, there's a couple ways I could do that. I could do it like this and kind of type in impress.init, and then it'll kick it off. Right? So I could do that in here. So I can say script files. Let's do that. This is way one. So here's my script file. And I want to call the Impress. If you notice, it comes up in my code hinting. And then it also comes up with init, right? And now I've initialized my framework. That's the only thing you really need to do. This is one way of doing it. You could alternatively create your own main or game.javascript file or game.typescript file. But if you do a TypeScript file, you need to get type definition libraries for Impress.js, right? And if I was going to look for that, if I was interested in doing that, I could always look for something called definitely typed. I kind of talked about this before. Definitely typed. Here it is. And if you notice, it's hosted on GitHub as well. Boris Yankov / definitely typed. Right? He's got all the most modern, popular JavaScript frameworks in here for TypeScript, right? So if I was going to try to find this thing, so if I go Control F, and if I try and find Impress, right? If you notice, Impress is there, Impress.js, and there's the impress.d.ts file. If I look in there, it's a very small type definition library for Impress.js. So I could theoretically do all this in TypeScript and access Impress in TypeScript, right? So just because we're using TypeScript and I want you guys to learn how to do that, I'm going to go with way number 2 and create a new TypeScript file called game.ts for now, all right? Where you're going to house all your custom JavaScript, all right? So not in libraries, because libraries we're going to make another one under scripts, right click, I'm going to add, and I'm going to make a new TypeScript file, right? And my new TypeScript file is going to be called game, right? It says, hey, do you want to look for my any TypeScript definition libraries? In this case, I want to say yes, because I want to see if NuGet package manager can find my type definition library for Impress.js. All right. And up here, I'm going to put in Impress, right? If you see an Impress library here, I'm giving you 2 options. 1, you can go to definitely typed, or 2, which is the better option, you can come in here into NuGet and just grab this one here, TypeScript definitely typed. You see this little blue icon? This is the logo for definitely typed, and click install. What it's going to do is it's going to produce this typings library right here. Here's my typings library for Impress.js. But remember, in order for me to get a code hinting in my game.ts file, I need to drag and drop a reference to this impress.d.ts file into this document, like this. All I'm doing is dragging and dropping the impress.d.ts file into my game.ts file. Okay, cool. I'm almost ready to set up. I haven't done a couple things though. I haven't added my game.ts file in here, and I want to get rid of this, right? So let's just kind of make some space into my index.html page. And I want to drag and drop my game.ts file in here. Now remember, when we talk TypeScript, when TypeScript isn't recognized by the browser, we need to transcompile it from JavaScript or TypeScript to JavaScript. That's what TypeScript is all about, right? And it's really a powerful little addition to JavaScript. Okay, so I need to make a reference to this, and it has to be in this order. First, I put my libraries like we did last time, and second, I do my custom file, my custom JavaScript file in here. This I don't need. I don't want to access this. I want to do this in here. So how do I do that? Right. First of all, let's just unpin this so you can see more stuff. I'm going to increase the size of the font so you guys can see a little clearer. Maybe I want to create my own initialization method. a function is usually the best way to do it. So I'm going to create a function, right? I'm going to call this thing init, my own init function. And inside there, I'm going to put some curly braces. Remember, from a JavaScript perspective, when you create a function, it's like a method in C# or in other languages, right? And the curly braces is a C style or C influence style way of telling me what my code block is and where my variables scope live and die, right? So anything in these brackets is what I'm going to perform, right? So I want to do that thing. Now this is where I can test to see if my Impress.js framework is linked up with my TypeScript file. I'm going to type impress. So impress, here it is. I can see it, which means this is a good sign, right? Impress dot and then init. This is exactly what I did before, but I did this in the index.html page, and I'm trying to show you not to do that, right? Because you might see documentation like that. Okay, cool. I'm going to go back into my index.html page and erase this because I don't need this anymore, right? Here we go. But I do need a reference somehow to kick this init method off when my page loads. So I'm going to use for now, I'm going to use this onload method, onload, and is equal to init. So basically when my page loads, it's going to call my game init file, right? And it's going to launch that. To test this out, I'm going to put a console.log command, which I normally do when I first do this. So console.log, and we'll say game is running. If I don't get this, I know something is wrong, right? Remember debugging 101, when we debug our program, if I run it the way it is, right now we're not going to see much, right? Because I'm not doing anything yet. But if I run this thing, if I press play or debug, it's going to launch a mini version of IIS, Internet Information Server Express, right, in the background. And if you see right now, there's nothing here because I haven't asked it to do anything. I'm going to go into the hamburger on the right here, or the sandwich. They're called different things on Chrome. I'm using Chrome to debug. Right click. I'm going to go to More Tools. And if you want to remember the shortcut, it's Control-Shift-J to go to JavaScript console, right? And then underneath this, right, there's some weird errors. It says, hey, uncaught type error, cannot read property add event listener of null. Well, it's going to give you that because you know what? We don't have, Impress.js is looking for a couple things we don't have yet. But the good news is we still see game is running, which is good. It means we've gotten to we've actually initialized the Impress.js framework. Game is running. So if you guys don't have this, right, something like this, you've done something wrong. All right, you should have a couple errors here, or maybe one error. All right, if I refresh, you might only go to one error, like this. Uncaught type error, cannot read property add event listener of null, because Impress.js requires a couple things we don't have in our index.html file right now. All right, index.html file is blank, actually. It's empty. And Impress.js doesn't work like that. Okay. By the way, I'm going to put this PowerPoint presentation up for you as well. If you want to follow this up, at the end of the class, I'll throw this up on eCentennial in your course documents. Okay, cool. So again, I think it's important to put in this UTF-8. We talked about this before, but what it really does for us is it stops us from getting a few errors in the console when we put character set is equal to UTF-8. It does that because it's trying to figure out if we're HTML5 compliant. Okay, we did this piece. Well, one thing we didn't do is make our own custom style sheet. So let's go back to Visual Studio for a second, and I'm going to stop debugging for a second as well. I'm going to bring up my Solution Explorer and pin it. You can unpin and pin your Solution Explorer as you feel fit to do, right? At will. I'm going to go into my CSS. If you notice, I only have my reset.css. I should probably put my own custom style sheet in there as well. I need to put it underneath my reset because I want to reset first and then do my custom styles. So I'm going to right click on CSS. I'm going to add, I'm going to go style sheet. Right? I'm going to call this thing main. So I'm going to have my own main.css. If you notice right now, it's empty. I just have a body tag that's empty. And that's okay. I need to connect it to my page, and the way, of course, I'm going to do it is drag and drop, baby. Drag and drop, right? I'm going to take my main.css and put it right underneath my reset.css, right? And now it's connected into my files. Are you with me? It's hot. It's crazy hot in here. And we need to take a break soon. So I'm heating up here, right? And not in a good way. All right. So this is where I'm going to start talking about putting in a gradient background. And if you notice, the first thing that we do here to get this gray gradient background is to use this background property. But let's say I forget how to do this, right? 'Cause maybe I'm not great at CSS, right? It's inside my body tag, and I want to access my background property, and I want to hit different kinds of browsers, right? Well, the easiest way to do that is to go and grab something that's online. I'm not going to do it myself. God, no, right? Or maybe you want to say, hell no, right? You're going to go into CSS, right? I've given you some links. And if I go to my first link, here's my Css3 generator. And I gave you this before, but you can go here, Css3Generator.com. I'm going to click on this thing. And if I want some kind of gradient background, here's gradient. I'm going to click gradient. It's going to point me to this gradient generator here, right? Another site, which is www.colorzilla.com/gradient-editor, right? And if you notice, my background is this, right? Nice blue. So instead of making that gray boring background we had for the dragon, now I have this blue boring background that I'm going to put in, right? Well, how do I do that? I can actually copy and paste everything that's here because I'm lazy, right? And I know you guys are lazy too. So I want you to, and I mean it in the best possible way, by the way. And I'm going to drag all this stuff, copy everything, or click the copy button, even better, right? And I'm going to go back into my main.css, which is right here, inside my body tag, and paste. And guess what I got? I got all these background tags, right? Like so. I'm just going to make it look nice. There we go. And I'm just going to kind of unpin this thing so you can see it. This is what I get. Yeah. This is what I get. Where for old browsers, I got this kind of thing right here, where it handles IE 10 plus, different kinds of browsers, blah, 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 blah. You might get something similar to this. I'm just going to make this a little smaller so you can see. It's just a few lines of code, right? Okay, I'm going to save my file. And if I run things the way things are right now, right? Let's see what happens. Do I get a gradient background on the background? How come? How come? Right? Why don't I get no gradient background? Tom, you said you're going to get a gradient background. You're not getting it. How come? Because I'm not finished. That's why. I'm not finished. I don't have any div tags. I don't have anything on my page. My page is blank, people. That's why I'm not getting anything. Until I put stuff on my page, I'm not going to get a thing. Right? FYI. And again, to see that, if I go to JavaScript console, again, I still get this uncaught error I'm getting in my Impress.js, and it's kind of a good indicator that nothing's going on yet. I haven't really accomplished my goals of putting stuff on my page. Okay, cool. So I've done this piece. Okay, now there is a couple of other things that are specific to Impress.js. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see it, right? Impress enabled is one thing that I'm putting in, and then there's this step, and it's going to kind of put together this general CSS. Again, this is a CSS heavy framework that I'm talking about. So let's do this now. So Impress enabled, right, and step. So I need to put that inside of my document. All right. By the way, this comes from the documentation, right? So I'm going to say Impress dash enabled, and then step. These are the two classes that I'm targeting right now. And what am I doing? I'm saying margin is 0 and opacity is 0.0. So the first two things I'm doing. So margin, right, 0, opacity 0.0, which means the opacity is turned. Everything's turned off. Okay, cool. No, look at this. I'm doing a transition. Oh man, a transition with an opacity of 1 second. So it takes 1 second for me to go from 0 to hero kind of thing, right? That's what I'm doing. So right now the transition opacity is 1 second. So now, can I do the same thing with CSS transitions? Yes, I can. Let's do that. Because I'm lazy, right? I'm going to go back to CSS. I'm going to go back to CSS Generator. I'm going to go back to here, and I want to see transition. Here's transition, right? And then, okay, what am I transitioning, right? All the background, blah, blah, whatever. What am I transitioning? The duration in seconds, I want to say 1 second, right? And the function, is it linear, blah, blah, blah. I can leave it all the way it is right now if I want to. If I say my background is transitioning, right? Okay, and if I say my function is a linear function, it gives me the code. What WebKit transition background is 1 second linear, right? That's not exactly what it's telling me in the PowerPoint presentation. So if I look here, it says there's no background. It just says all this stuff. But the thing is, it's typed it all for me, and I'm lazy, right? This is what I'm trying to show you here, right? So if I copy all this stuff and just remove the background pieces, I'm good to go, right? And linear, if I really want to. I don't have to choose a transition that's linear. It'll do an ease in if you're as a standard if you don't know how to do that. All right, so let's go back, and I'm going to kind of power through this. So paste it in, right? Hey, this is something interesting. How come these things are kind of put like this? How come they're all faded out like this? WebKit, da 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 da. Not yet, right? That's why. So I'm going to just get rid of these things because you know what? I am going to get rid of background, right? Because that's one thing. It's easier for me to remove than to type, right? And by the way, it removes. I want to point this out to you as well. It removes finger typing errors. I'm not good at finger typing. I made a mistake. I'm just going to remove all this stuff, and it's easier for me to remove stuff than to put it in. And by the way, are you ever expected to remember CSS? You know what? In the real world, no, you're not. So if someone's told you somewhere down the line before you got to this course that you're supposed to remember all your CSS, it's a lie. It's not true, right? It'd be nice if you remembered everything, right? But no one's expecting you to remember everything, especially not here. This isn't a CSS course. Okay. So I've got this, where I got it from this Css3 Generator. I got this, some background, right? That's what's happening right now. There's a bit of transition and so on. I've taken out the background elements of it, right? And I put it here. Are you with me? Don't worry, if you people aren't with me, I'm going to take this and change it later. This is the next piece I need. Impress enabled, so the same class, step active. If it's an active step, I need to make it opacity 1. So impress enabled, step dot active, so different classes here, step active, opacity 1. All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to say impress enabled. I'm going to move this up so you guys can see what I'm doing. Right, and if you notice, I still have this, right? Step, oops, if I can type, step active, right? And I'm going to say opacity then is 1. Now, if you notice opacity 1, right? How have I typed it in? 1. There's no semicolon. That's incorrect. I recommend highly that you put semicolons everywhere you can. Okay, cool. We're just styling things. Okay, next piece. Slide. And this is a key piece here, the slide. Each slide is almost like your PowerPoint slide, right? So you need to put all these pieces in here. Now, if you notice, display block is using the, again, we're doing everything so that each piece of the slide is one on top of the other, right? Our width is 700 and our height is 600. So display block, width 700, height 600. That's the slide size. Okay, so again, we're going to do this here down here. We're going to make this slide. This is the class we're going to affect. I'm going to kind of zoom up here so you can see, right? Display block. That's important to put in, right? And I believe it's a width and height, a value. Width 700, height 600. Width 700 pixels, height 600 pixels. Are you with me? I'm defining the size of my slide here. All right, I'm building this out. Padding 40 and 60. You can change this, by the way, if you want your slides to look different. Padding is 40 pixels and 60 pixels, right? For top and bottom, left and right. Left and right 60 pixels. Top and bottom is 40 pixels. That's what this means. All right. Background color is white. So my slides are white. If you don't want to make your slides white, you can make yours another color. So background dash color is white, right? Background color is white. That's what I'm putting in here. Border is 1 pixel solid, and I'm using an RGB value here, 0, 0, 0, and 0.3, right? So if you notice, what's RGB 0, 0, 0? Come on, guys. Oh, 000? She be black, baby. Black. Black. And then with 0.3, no, there's 000. And 0.3 is the alpha transparency, right? Which means it's 30%, it's transparent. That's why it becomes more gray. So 1 pixel solid, RGBA 000.3. I could also make it a little bit different, but why not? Right, so again, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say border, 1 pixel solid, right? And if I go RGBA, right, 0, 0, 0, and then 0.3, you see that the color is going to come out. 0.3 is your alpha transparency value. So it produces this really thin border around the entire slide. That's what it's going to do. A 1 pixel solid border that's kind of grayish. Okay, cool. We're almost there. Our color. What's color? What does color hit? This is just a refresher for you guys. Text. Color is RGB. Of course, someone's calling me when I'm teaching. RGB 52, 52, 52. All right, it's not RGBA. So color, if you want the same as me, I'm going to go color, right? RGB is another way of doing it. 52, 52, 52, right? Alternately, you could have put hexadecimal values here as well. All right, text shadow. This is kind of different. 022 with an RGBA of 000 and 0.1. So text shadow, right? And if you notice, right, 0, 2, and 2 pixels. So 0, 2 pixels, 0, sorry, 0. I'll be okay. 2 pixels and 2 pixels with an RGBA value of 0, 0, 0, and 0.1. Again, all we're doing is we're setting up the way our slide is going to look. We're adding shadow to the text as well, right? All right, our border radius. So the border, we're going to make it so that the border radius is 5 pixels, so it's rounded borders. That's what it is. So border dash radius, right? And it's a 5 pixel border radius. The higher value, the more rounded the corners. Okay, the next one, font family. Open Sans, Arial, Sans Serif. I'll be okay. Font family. And if I go Open Sans, I got to make sure I type it correctly, because if I don't type Open Sans like this, and I'm going to say Arial Sans Serif at the end as alternates, Arial, right, and Sans Serif, right? I'm defining my font family. Guys and girls, I want you to make your own fonts, whatever you choose. You can also use web fonts as a bonus. If you go to web fonts, and you generate your own Google web fonts here, it's perfect, right, for your slides, if you know how to do that kind of thing. And font size is 30 pixels, which is a pretty good size font. So font size is equal to 30 pixels. Okay, this was pretty tedious, I'll say, and it was like a little bit like watching paint peel, but we need to do this in order for us to set up our slides properly, right? I'm trying to frame it for you so you need to know you can set up your slides from scratch just like this. But we don't have any slides yet, and we're kind of about halfway through, and what I'd like to try and do is take a short break, 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll get back to the rest of this. Meanwhile, while you guys are taking a break, I'll throw this PowerPoint presentation up on eCentennial.